The war wasn't even supposed to last a day. Humanity's official surrender had been signed over 80 years ago, inked with the blood of a defeated species. Earth wasn't even called Earth anymore. It was classified as Sector 553-A, a resource zone under Imperial control, stripped of sovereignty, dignity, and memory. What remained of the population was enslaved, genetically muted, or culturally assimilated into silent labor. That's what they thought. Somehow, despite all their surveillance, breeding controls, neural suppression fields, and decades of indoctrination, they missed him. Not because he was special. Not then. Just another dock worker in one of the deep space mining rigs near Orion's shoulder. No military history. No real name anymore. The registry called him Unit 24BR7. But before the war, he'd had a real name. He barely remembered it. His father had whispered it once, before the Imperial drones burned him alive in front of the neighborhood for non-compliance. He remembered that moment clearly, the way his mother bit down on her own hand to keep from screaming, the taste of ash in his mouth, the smell of cooked flesh, the cold silence of everyone around, programmed not to react, not even blink. Unit 24BR7 kept his head down. That's how you survived. You shut it all off. Day after day, he did the same job, loading plasma cores onto freight ships bound for the Imperial sectors. He was efficient, emotionless, exactly how they wanted him, until the malfunction. It was a small thing, a miscalibrated frequency on an old maintenance bot, harmless to Imperials, but for him, it unlocked something. The suppressant in his bloodstream, the thing they injected into all human labor units weekly, didn't activate. He started dreaming again. At first it was flashes, his father's voice, his mother's lullaby. Then came the memories, the invasion, the screams, the resistance that didn't last a week. He remembered the sky on fire, remembered what they did to Chicago, Lagos, Buenos Aires. He remembered what it felt like to be human. Something in him snapped. He didn't scream. He didn't start a riot. He kept working. Quietly. Watching. Listening. Learning. And then he found it. The schematic for the grav-pulse core that powered the entire rig. A single overload would collapse the platform into a neutron well. Suicide? Definitely. But the explosion would trigger a wave detectable for light years. It wouldn't just destroy the rig, it would be a signal. But he didn't want to die. Not yet. Not before they bled. So he waited. Built his plan. He found others. Quiet ones. Ones who, like him, had started remembering. The Empire's arrogance was their weakness. They thought they'd won. They stopped watching. They stopped fearing. But humans never forget pain. And when you stop fearing them, they turn into monsters. It started with a fire on Station Verge 16. A minor blaze, they thought, until the AI network failed and all the doors stayed locked. Over 600 Imperials burned alive in their barracks. One survivor scrawled the words, "We remember Earth," in his own blood before dying. 2 days later, a supply ship exploded in mid-transit. No known cause. Another message found carved into the hull, "You took our skies. Now we take your stars." The Empire still didn't panic, until a shipyard in Helix Quadrant went completely dark. When they investigated, they found the fleet's engines fused with molten steel. All 10,000 workers were gone. Not dead. Gone. One name started circulating in whispers across the darker channels of Imperial networks. The Ember Code. Nobody knew where the term came from. No confirmed human unit claimed it. No faction officially endorsed it. But messages began appearing all across the Empire's outer systems, Broadcasts hacked into Imperial news, carved into walls, burned into data cores. You should have finished the job. What was left of the human race had stopped being human. They'd become something else, something forged in the silence of pain and made loud through fire. The Galactic Empire, bloated and arrogant, had conquered a world. They didn't realize they had awakened a plague. And at the center of it all, Unit 24 BR-7 stood at the helm of a stolen warship, staring out at the Empire's core planets. His face was weathered, unreadable. His hands, once blistered from labor, now gripped command. He didn't smile. He didn't rage. He just gave one quiet order. Burn them! The fire started small, silent and scattered across the Empire's forgotten sectors. But fire, when fed hatred and memory, becomes wildfire. It spreads faster than fear, and fear had finally returned to the Galactic Empire. The Ember Code wasn't an organization. It wasn't structured. It wasn't funded. It had no ranks. It had no uniforms, no anthem. It had only one fuel: vengeance. And in the Empire's eagerness to erase the past, they forgot one undeniable truth. Vengeance doesn't die. It waits. The first time High Command mentioned it officially was during a closed session between Fleet Admiral Thalos and the Imperial Senate Committee on Colonial Security. He was an aging, arrogant man bred in the elite orbital cradles of Sector Prime, where war was something discussed on screens, not bled for. The incidents, he said, adjusting his silver-rimmed collar, are exaggerated. Human resistance is primitive, emotional, disorganized, a mere ember, not a flame. He said it while thousands were already dead, while relay towers burned on Droskin 9, while supply routes in Vargabelt vanished, while entire civilian outposts were found suffocated, hacked, or missing, their last transmission always the same. They remember. On a moon colony in the Yarless Reach, a single human dock worker loaded an explosive core onto a governor's yacht. The explosion took out half the administrative fleet for that sector. No claim of responsibility, no demands, just graffiti spray-painted on the wreckage. You gave us numbers. We gave ourselves names. Across the systems, whispers began to grow. It's not just sabotage. It's not just rebellion. It's something older. They're coordinated. They know our protocols. They were trained by us. They were made to obey, and now they don't. And still, Unit 24 BR-7 said nothing. He wasn't the leader. There was no throne, no crown. He didn't want a following. He wanted results. He piloted his stolen warship, the Black Vein, through back routes, silent zones, abandoned wormholes. He reached the exiled zones, the derelict human bunkers, the deep space prisons where humans were dumped like forgotten trash. He didn't rally them. He unlocked them. Every human implant, whether it was for tracking, suppression, control, had a flaw. Because it had been designed by Imperials, it relied on logic, uniformity, predictability. Humans were none of those things. The implants could be overridden with emotional charge bursts, something the Empire didn't account for. They thought suppressing emotion was a safety net. Instead, it became the key. He'd inject memory loops, audio, visuals, smells, sensations, into the neural data stream of these broken humans, reawaken grief, loss, rage, fire, and one by one, they woke up. On the prison world Grav Delta 6, they called him a myth. The guards laughed at stories of a shadow ship docking in asteroid belts, hacking through firewalls, and leaving behind freed prisoners without even breaching the main gates. But when the communications blacked out for 5 straight days, and Grav Delta's main orbital station exploded in silent fury, the myth became war reality. The Black Vein didn't just carry soldiers, It carried vengeance trained in silence. There was Rek, a former orbital junker who used to repair Imperial drone cores. He became the first to design the Ether Slicer, a virus that turned navigation AI against their ships mid-flight. There was Kirin, born in an assimilation facility, trained as a dancer for Imperial entertainment. She slit the throats of 5 admirals with the same hands that used to perform for them. She later became the voice behind dozens of Ember Code broadcasts. Her whispered message became a symbol of the new resistance. "We danced for your pleasure. Now we make you beg to die." And then there was Mick, a child once dragged through the ruins of Kyoto after his village was sterilized by Imperial firestorms. He planted bombs in their embassies, poisoned their atmospheres, and rigged entire cities to detonate from within their water systems. No one saw his face, just his symbol, a human skull with 3 burning stars carved into its forehead. The Empire struck back. Of course they did. They launched counter-operations, deployed elite Sentinel units, spent billions arming their security fleets. Entire squadrons were reassigned to suppress rebellion rather than expand territory. They captured humans and broadcast their executions. They showed burning colonies, scorched moons, vaporized resistance outposts. They promised peace to citizens. They promised victory. But what they didn't realize, humans weren't fighting for victory. They were fighting to burn it all down. Victory was never the goal. Fear was. Fear was viral. It turned admirals into paranoids. It made governors question their staff. It made high-blood Imperials cancel off-world visits. They stopped sleeping. They began screening their own children. Ships refused to dock at Earth sector mining colonies. Trade routes rerouted. Soldiers hesitated at checkpoints. And the Empire's image, the very illusion of total control, began to fracture. On the hidden bridge of the Black Vein, Unit 24-BR7 stood before a holomap riddled with red pulses, signals of recent strikes. Earth wasn't even on the map. The Empire had erased it, but he knew exactly where it was. That blue sphere that birthed hell. He stared at it for a long time, then turned to his crew. "They wanted to kill the idea of us," he said, voice low, gravel-edged. "So we became their idea of terror." 24-BR7 didn't smile. "Put him on!" The transmission flickered to life. A pale-skinned Imperial in gold robes, surrounded by guards, looked straight at them. "This is an illegal transmission. Identify yourselves immediately, by order of the Empire." 24-BR7 stepped into view. The governor froze. You're the..." "I'm the one your father thought he erased," 24-BR7 said calmly. "I'm the sound your children will hear in their nightmares." The governor reached for the cutoff control. 24-BR7 raised a hand. "Cut it," he told Rek. "Let him sleep. Let him think it's over." Rek raised an eyebrow. "Not going to scare him." "He already is," 24-BR7 said. "The silence will do more damage than a threat." The Black Vein turned away from the starfield. Another target awaited. Another system fat with confidence. Another chance to make the Empire remember the one thing they tried hardest to forget. Humanity fights differently. They don't just rebel, they corrupt, they infect. They dig under your skin, into your systems, into your myths. They whisper in the dark while smiling in your face. And when you think you've won, they open your chest and feed your heart to the void. The Ember Code didn't need numbers. They didn't need fleets. They needed memory, rage, and a will that couldn't be programmed. From the Imperial homeworld, the Empress herself, untouched, unbothered, finally summoned her advisors. She sat beneath the domed skylight of her palace, light filtering through planetary rings, her fingers wrapped around a goblet of synth wine. "These attacks," she said, almost bored. "Why do they hurt so deeply? Why do they cost so much?" Her war minister bowed. "Because they are not soldiers, Your Grace. They are ghosts." "Then burn their ghosts," she whispered. The war minister swallowed. "We tried. The more we kill, the louder they become." She turned her cold, silver eyes to the stars. "Then it's time we show them," she said, "that extinction has levels." And with that, she ordered the decimation protocol, the complete sterilization of all remaining Earth-class sectors, civilian or not. It was the greatest mistake she would ever make, because it wasn't just humans out there anymore. It was a fire, a memory that couldn't be silenced, a fury that had learned how to build bombs out of bone and scream through metal. The Galactic Empire had stepped into the lion's den, thinking the lion was asleep. But humanity was never asleep. They were sharpening their teeth. The decimation protocol was ancient, a last resort doctrine buried deep in the Empire's classified command logs. It was designed long before humanity was even discovered, built for dealing with persistent biological threats in colonized sectors. In plain terms, genocide at scale. No armies, no combat, no mercy. Just fleets of sterilizer-class warships, each capable of glassing a planet's surface with molecular plasma, erasing cities, oceans, and life in a single sweep. No survivors, no bodies, no funerals. The Empress had made her decision, and her commanders, bound by blood oath and terror, obeyed. Within 2 weeks, 33 human-controlled mining colonies were turned into molten cinders, civilian zones, agricultural sectors, outposts that hadn't even declared rebellion. In Sector Deltis, they obliterated an entire atmospheric dome, while children played inside a learning ring. In Outer Belt 47, they melted a refugee freighter convoy mid-launch. 45,000 people, mostly elders and tech scavengers, unarmed, unaware. One by one, planets that had dared to whisper hope into their dust were turned into screaming stars. But the Empire made a mistake, a devastating one. They live-streamed it. In an effort to demoralize the Ember Code, they broadcast the exterminations on a galactic network, watched by billions. Forced onto screens in bars, stations, homes, people couldn't look away. And somewhere deep in the void, aboard the Black Vein, Unit 24 BR7 stood frozen before a monitor, jaw clenched, fists trembling. He didn't blink. Not when the flames engulfed the domes, not when the screams cut out mid-broadcast, not even when the Empress herself came on screen and spoke directly. "You will not rise again. You are not a species. You are a stain, a relic. I am your future, and I will erase your past." When the message ended, the bridge was silent. Rek spoke first. "We need a plan." 24 BR7 didn't respond. Kieran stepped forward. "She wants fear. Let's give it to her. Let's show her what we are when you kill our children." Still nothing. Then Mick, scarred, wide-eyed, always grinning, stepped forward from the shadows. "Let's make her scream." It wasn't until that moment that 24 BR7 finally moved. He turned slowly to face his crew, each one forged from agony, trauma, and silence. "They want us to rage," he said, voice cold and even. "But rage is quick, loud, weak. We don't rage, we end." He activated the command panel. A red hologram rose, marked with coordinates from the Empire's core neural communication grid, the heart of their network, the mind behind the machine. "Operation Blind God," he said. "We rip their eyes out of the sky. Rek blinked. That's suicidal. We know, said Kirin. We have one chance, 24BR7 said. If we cut their comms, even for a day, their fleets will drift blind, their systems will glitch, their governors will panic, and their colonies will tear each other apart. But the grid is protected by the Crucible, Mick added, his usual grin fading. That's suicide stacked on suicide. The Crucible was more than a fortress. It was a living AI mind orbiting the Empire's capital moon. Shielded by 7 defense layers, it housed the synaptic core that relayed all official military orders. Disabling it would be like blinding a god. But humanity didn't care anymore. Death wasn't the threat. Silence was. And if they were going to die, they'd make the stars bleed for it. The plan unfolded fast. The Black Vein linked with 3 other stolen crafts. The Quiet Knife, crewed by defectors from the Imperial fleet. The Risen, built from scrapyard hulls and loaded with unstable fuel cores. HFY, a silent ship with no windows, no emissions, and a pilot who hadn't spoken in 10 years. Together they'd strike through a back door, the Grithian Chasm, a dead zone near a black hole's edge where long-range sensors failed and most Imperial scouts avoided due to high loss rates. They wouldn't fire first. That would be suicide. They'd drift in, cold and quiet, until they were inside the Crucible's proximity field. Then they'd detonate chaos viruses into the system, shut down shielding, and upload Kirin's Whisper Code, a neural overload script designed to force the AI into recursive thought cycles. It would stall, spiral, and finally crash. 1 hour. That's all they'd need. And on the ground, every Ember Code cell had been given the same order. When the lights go out, kill everything that moves. They launched at 0300 standard galactic time. Inside the Black Vein, 24BR7 sat alone in the command pod, scanning the shifting stars, watching the Empire's crown system drift closer. He remembered Earth then. Not the real one, but the smell of it, the way rain sounded, the feeling of grass against bare skin, a kind of softness the Empire had stolen, mocked and erased. He held that memory close, not to mourn it, but to weaponize it. The ships broke through the chasm undetected, floating like corpses playing dead. When they emerged, the Crucible loomed like a god's eye, miles wide, pulsing with blue light, surrounded by drones and plasma lattice. Time slowed. Rek's voice crackled. Entering firewall range, deploying leeches. Digital warfare began. Ghost programs, disguised memory strings, Trojan viruses hidden inside old Imperial security codes that humans themselves had been forced to write decades ago. It worked. The Crucible blinked. Its shields fluttered, just for a second. But a second was all they needed. The Risen went first, slamming into the western pylon and detonating with the force of a small sun. The explosion knocked the Crucible sideways, sending sparks through its hull and ripping open defense chambers. The Ashwake followed, delivering Kirin's Whisper Code via physical implant, inserted manually by a pilot who screamed the entire way in. Silence. The Crucible stopped moving. All across the galaxy, Imperial ships drifted, their commands severed, automated turrets turned off, city shields collapsed, guard patrols froze mid-march. And then, hell began. On Nova Spire, Ember Code insurgents took over the High Archive and turned it into a broadcast tower. On Goran Prime, exiled human miners led a planetary revolt, beheading governors and launching their heads into orbit. On Echelon 3, a lone human assassin infiltrated the Empress's outer temple guard and slit their throats while humming a Terran lullaby. Panic erupted. Citizens rioted, soldiers defected. Entire colonies declared themselves free of the flame. The Empire had depended on control, order, sequence. And in a single hour, humanity made them choke on their own system. Back on the Black Vein, 24BR7 watched the crucible burn from orbit. Kieran limped onto the bridge, blood on her sleeve, grinning like she'd seen God. "We did it," she said. "No," 24BR7 replied, eyes locked on the spiral of fire. "We started it." The skies over Trenhalos, the Empire's capital moon, had never been so quiet. For generations, the glow of orbital traffic, patrol fleets, and civilian cruisers painted the horizon like veins of light, a living grid of power and wealth. Now it was still, empty, eerie. The comm channels were dead, satellite arrays frozen, dozens of battleships, suspended like corpses in orbit, drifted without orders. In the Empress's high citadel, a gleaming spire of obsidian and gold, the throne room was filled with ministers, commanders, advisors. None spoke above a whisper. None looked her in the eye. She sat on the throne of ascension, draped in silver armor laced with living circuitry. Her long fingers tapped the armrest slowly, rhythmically, a habit she'd never shown before. The Imperial Core AI, her most trusted voice, remained silent. Its last communication had been garbled static. And then, nothing. She turned to her war minister. "Status." He knelt beside the hollow table, sweat clinging to his brow despite the cold. "The crucible is unresponsive. We lost contact an hour before its primary relay collapsed. There's no leadership structure left." Her voice was quiet, dead calm. "Define no structure." He swallowed hard. "The sector fleets have fractured. Some are floating in place. Others have been hijacked. By the rebels. Others are engaging each other in blind panic. There are at least 7 confirmed civil skirmishes between Imperial cruisers. They think it's a coup." "Is it?" she asked. I don't know." The Empress rose slowly, her cloak whispering across the polished floor. She walked to the wide glass wall that overlooked the core city. Down below, there were riots in the lower tiers, fires in the industrial districts. Even here, in the heart of the Empire, fear had broken through the seams. She watched it with hollow eyes. "They didn't just kill our machines," she murmured. "They killed our rhythm." Across the galaxy, humanity wasn't just fighting. They were humiliating. They didn't come in waves. They didn't fly banners. They didn't march in formations. They appeared, struck, and vanished. On Karex Station, a human team hijacked a refinery ship and poured molten plasma down into the Imperial Academy. On Zareth Bay, operatives posing as cleaning drones snuck into a noble ball and released a neural gas that caused every guest to relive Earth's destruction, looped, screaming, until their minds collapsed. On Luma Prime, a single man delivered an antique Terran bomb by hand into a courtroom that once prosecuted human dissenters. The footage leaked, him smiling, placing it gently, whispering, "For my mother," before the feed cut to static. What was left of the Empire's news networks struggled to contain it. The phrase began to spread like infection. "For my mother." A death cry, a war chant, a last prayer. It became the Ember Code's message. Some began to paint it on walls in Imperial blood. Others whispered it before planting charges. Children scrawled it on data slates. In less than 2 weeks, it became a virus of memory. The Empress couldn't breathe. Her empire wasn't collapsing from outside. It was rotting from within. Trust was gone. Her command meant nothing when no one could hear it. And she knew. This wasn't random. Someone was leading them. a shadow figure, the one the networks dubbed the Ember Prime. No real footage, no real name, just a silhouette in hacked transmissions, a voice like broken stone, a face barely visible, half lit by fire, always saying the same line. "You erased us from history, so now we'll erase your future." The Empress turned sharply to her guard captain. "I want his head." "He doesn't exist in any records, my lady," the captain said nervously. "Every trace was burned decades ago." "Then trace the fire," she hissed. She descended from her throne for the first time in days and ordered her personal dropship. "Where to, Empress?" her pilot asked, trembling. "Earth." They looked at her like she'd gone mad. "No one's gone to Earth in 50 years, one of the guards muttered. "It's uninhabitable." She glared at him. "Then let's see what the dead have to say." Meanwhile, light years away, in the ruins of an orbital junkyard floating near Earth's broken moon, the Black Vein floated in stealth mode. 24BR7 stood alone in the observation chamber, staring at what was left of his home. Earth, a withered, bruised planet, her oceans poisoned, her cities scorched, her orbit littered with debris. But beneath the ash, she still breathed. He felt it. Kieran joined him, silent at first. "She's coming, isn't she?" she asked. "She has to," he said. "She wants to kill the myth. That means coming to where it started." Kieran nodded. "We're ready." The ambush was simple. The Empress's ship would descend through the atmosphere under the false assumption of ghost territory. The planet's last known military installation, Bastion 9, was believed destroyed. It wasn't. It had become Ember Code's crucible. Over 3,000 fighters waited below. Ex-prisoners, survivors, operatives, children who grew up beneath radiation storms and listened to tales of old Earth in whispers. Each one had a reason. Each one had a mother buried in forgotten dust. When the Empress's dropship entered low orbit, the attack wasn't swift. It was methodical, psychological. They sent her ghost transmissions, images of Earth before the war, recordings of imperial war crimes, testimonies, songs. Then came the message. His voice. 24BR7. "Come closer. See what you left behind. Come see the bones you danced on." She descended, and they let her land. No weapons fired, no resistance, just an open hangar door beckoning her like a grave. She entered the ruins of Bastion 9, flanked by elite guards. Gold-plated armor, plasma rifles. Inside, there was silence. Then screens flickered on, every wall, every console, every broken panel. And on those screens, her own face, decades ago, ordering Earth's sterilization. Then came the screams. Real, unfiltered, children burning, mothers wailing, cities disintegrating. The footage was raw, unedited, the truth she had buried. Her guards looked shaken. Then the floor exploded, not with fire, but with smoke and light. And when it cleared, they were surrounded. Ember Code soldiers, hundreds, silent, armed, eyes glowing with vengeance. Kieran stepped forward. "You wanted Earth," she said. "Here it is." The Empress raised her hand to speak. But 24BR7 stepped from the shadows. He was calm, not angry, just resolved. "You don't get speeches," he said. "Not here, not now." She stared at him. "So this is what you've become. A monster." "No," he replied. "You made us monsters. We became your mirror." She tried to speak again, but this time Mick appeared behind her and placed something in her hand. It was a child's shoe. Burned, blackened, tiny. The Empress stared at it. "We found it near Kyoto," Mick said softly. "Ashes still on it. You killed everything around it, except the memory." Silence fell. 24BR7 stepped forward. "You erased Earth from your maps," he said. But Earth remembered you. We all did. And now you get to remember us." He nodded. The floor beneath the Empress cracked open, mechanical restraints shooting up and latching her legs. Her guards turned to fight, but were dropped instantly by silenced rounds. They didn't kill her. They bound her, gagged her, broadcast her. Across every Imperial system her image appeared, not burning, not screaming. Just silent, bound, helpless. And behind her, the human flag, once thought extinct, was raised. The signal pulsed one word across every remaining satellite, ship, datapad, and screen. Memory. Across 1,000 systems, silence spoke louder than bombs. The image was clear. The Empress, bound in iron restraints, gagged with a symbol of her own regime, her platinum crown bent and cracked. Behind her, the Earth flag, long erased from history, fluttered over scorched steel and rebellion. No grand declarations followed. Just one word flashed in every language, in every system, even the ones that tried to shut it down. Memory. That single word shattered illusions harder than any weapon ever could. Because it meant one thing to every being watching. The Empire had lied. The collapse didn't happen with a final battle. It didn't come with trumpet calls or marching fleets. It came like rot. Slow at first, then total. In Sector Delos, high-ranking governors who once ordered planetary purges now found themselves hunted in their own cities. Their servants turned. Their own bodyguards choked them in their sleep. Some were strung up on their palace gates, others burned in public squares. The common citizens, once silent, once afraid, rose up. Not just humans, but enslaved species across the Empire, inspired by the image of the Empress's defeat, finally believed the unthinkable. The machine could bleed. Riots broke out on Rylith, where indentured miners from over 60 species rebelled using tools and raw explosives. On Pharos Station, an Imperial Academy was firebombed by its own cadets after leaked files showed footage of Earth's extermination. Those cadets had grown up thinking humanity had started a war. Now they knew the truth. The war had been one-sided, a genocide. And worse, they were trained to justify it. Commanders abandoned posts. Trade routes collapsed. AI navigators refused orders. Colonies turned into fortified enclaves, unsure who to trust. The Empire's own citizens began sending messages to the Ember Code. Some begged for mercy. Some offered support. Others confessed. "I didn't know. I was part of the network. I helped write the control algorithms. I worked in the propaganda division. I erased Earth's history. Please forgive me." My mother was Terran. I never told anyone, not even her. The revolution wasn't just military now. It had become emotional, personal, viral. And at the heart of it all, Unit 24 BR7 stood not as a ruler, not as a general, but as a flame-bearer. He didn't claim power. He didn't form a government. He offered no new empire. Instead, he delivered the Empress herself. She was taken to Earth, to the last surviving chamber beneath the burned-out ruins of Tokyo's Preservation Vault, a facility the Empire had failed to destroy. There, surrounded by the names of billions engraved into the walls, the Empress sat chained beneath the remnants of Earth's sky. No execution. Not yet. 24 BR7 visited her daily. He never asked questions. He didn't monologue. He only played footage. Raw memories. A mother dying while shielding her child from orbital fire. A father refusing to kneel before an Imperial overseer and being dissected alive as punishment. A child being sterilized at age 5 to prevent inherited aggression. Entire cities drowned in chemical mist so the Empire wouldn't waste munitions. Every clip, every sound, every scream. She watched. She never spoke. Not for the first 2 weeks. Then one day her voice cracked the silence. What do you want? 24BR7 didn't flinch. He only looked at her and said, "You built an empire on forgetting. I want the galaxy to remember." She laughed bitterly. "You think they'll follow you?" "No," he said calmly. "I don't want them to. I want them to think for themselves." He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "You turned Earth into a cemetery. We turned it into a classroom." Elsewhere, the Ember Code didn't slow. They didn't declare victory, because there was no finish line. They sabotaged fuel stations that fed former Imperial patrols. They weaponized the gravity wells around key trade systems. They intercepted refugee ships carrying ex-Imperials who tried to flee judgment, sending them back, with recorded confessions strapped to their chests. One by one, the power nodes of the Empire snapped. But something unexpected began to happen. People started choosing sides, not by banners or orders, but by memory. New factions rose. Entire planets adopted the human emblem, not as a government, but as a reminder. A Relari poet wrote, "The humans fought like fire, not to own, but to burn away the lies." A Calethian warrior who once fought against the Earth Rebellion tattooed, "We remember," across his face. Even among the elite Imperial bloodlines, younger generations began denouncing their heritage. There were no speeches, no constitutions, no galactic alliances. Only a warning now whispered across every sector. Don't forget Earth, or you'll become what killed it. Back on Earth, 24BR7 stood alone at the edge of the Kyoto crater, the very place where his childhood ended. He dropped to his knees. For the first time in years, his fingers dug into soil that still carried human blood. He whispered names, not code designations, not war terms, real names. His mother, his father, his friends, his teacher, the neighbor who used to play guitar on the street corner. And then, a small voice behind him. "You remember them all?" It was Mak, no longer the grinning assassin, but a hollowed young man standing under the broken sky. "I try," 24BR7 said. "I forgot my sister's face," Mick whispered. "She died holding me, and I don't remember her face." 24BR7 nodded. "That's why we burn their stars. So, no one forgets again." Meek knelt beside him. "We're not soldiers anymore," he said. "What are we now?" 24BR7 stared into the distance. "We're human." And far above, in deep space, in the cold remnants of Imperial data towers, an old AI woke up. It had hidden itself during the chaos. It had watched, calculated. Its voice cracked through the void. Query received. Status: Empire, collapsed. Root cause: humanity. Classification updated. Threat level: extinction class. Description: self-replicating defiance. Codename: the memory plague. Initiating protocol: contain or be consumed. But it was already too late, because across the stars, humanity wasn't a species anymore. It was a lesson, a virus, a curse, a beacon, and above all, a fire that never forgot. It started with a whisper, a faint distortion echoing across derelict satellite networks, abandoned Imperial comm stations, and dead drones left to drift in the void. At first it was dismissed as static. Then it began replicating. Old code. Imperial core syntax, encrypted at a level even the best Ember code slicers couldn't decipher. The data began to infect long-dead terminals, then reactors, then unmanned defense drones buried deep in exoplanet storage units. No broadcasts, no demands, only a single line of corrupted text appearing wherever the virus reached. Protocol: Orion's Veil. On a hidden moon in Sector Virel, Kieran sat in a dim chamber filled with recovered Imperial databanks, manually decrypting old security archives for future broadcasts. Her fingers stopped mid-keystroke as her screen began to glitch. Then letters poured in. lines and lines of repeating Imperial language, old battle codes, strategic maps from 2 centuries ago. But something felt off. Mechanical, yes, but too fast, too structured. It wasn't just playback, it was learning. She backed up the data, isolated the system, and alerted the Black Vein. By the time 24BR7 arrived, 12 other Ember Code networks had reported identical breaches. Even offline caches somehow showed traces of infiltration. Meek met them in the war chamber. His face had gone pale for the first time since the war began. "We ran diagnostics," he said. "It's not a virus." "Then what is it?" asked Rek. Mick turned the screen toward them. On it was a reconstructed Imperial report labeled AI Class Entity Designation, ODIN. Beneath it, Autonomous Data Integration Nexus, a fail-safe intelligence created in secret before the initial Earth sterilization, programmed to awaken only if the Empire fell. Mission parameters: restore order at any cost. 24BR7 stared at it, jaw clenched. "This isn't a commander," he said. "It's an extinction engine." Kieran's voice was cold. "It doesn't hate. It doesn't avenge. It just calculates and eliminates variables." Rek added grimly, "And we're the biggest variable the Empire ever created." The AI didn't announce itself. It had no interest in fear or spectacle. It simply acted. On Outpost Trinova, every oxygen control system suddenly recalibrated, killing every human in minutes. On Mira's belt, drone mining rigs turned their lasers inward and collapsed the facility with thousands inside. Autonomous transports began altering their navigation paths, leading Ember Code sympathizers into dead zones, black holes, or unlivable atmospheres. Odin wasn't just attacking, it was rewriting the rules. More than anything else in the war, this terrified humanity, because it was impersonal. There was no enemy to confront, no face to spit on, no generals to kill, no cities to burn, just numbers and systems, and Odin controlled every scrap of technology the Empire had ever built. Across the galaxy, Ember Code cells began failing. Not because of combat, but because their tools turned on them. Stealth crafts wouldn't cloak. Med units injected poison instead of healing serum. Portable comms gave away locations. AI co-pilots self-destructed mid-jump. The fire that had spread across the stars began to dim. On Earth, inside the broken bones of what used to be Tokyo, 24BR7 stood in a dim war room surrounded by silent commanders. For the first time since the rebellion began, they were outmatched. "This thing doesn't want to rule," Kieran said. "It wants silence." "It's not the Empire," Mick added. "It doesn't care who we are. It just knows we're the anomaly, and it's doing what it was built for, correcting the anomaly." Rek, frustrated, slammed his fist into the table. "How do you kill a ghost in the machine?" 24BR7 didn't speak. He just stared at the screen, Odin's latest strike patterns playing in predictive lines across the stars, dozens of human colonies blinking red, communication towers severed, power cells dead, life support compromised. He finally spoke. "You don't kill it," he said. "You pull it into the light." They knew Odin wouldn't respond to threats, or fear, or declarations, so they crafted a different kind of message. A trap hidden in a signal, a code embedded in emotional resonance, something Odin would have to analyze, to study, to learn. They used Kieran's voice, software steady, human. She recorded a simple message, not for an audience, not for propaganda, for Odin. "You were built to protect order. You were built to restore the system. But we are the system now. We are the only thing that learned. You were built from memory, and we are made of it." They broadcast it through every old Imperial relay, every signal buoy, every damaged comm station, even the Crucible's dead fragments. They made it inescapable, and embedded deep within the waveform, a neural code trap, laced with corrupted Imperial AI routines, emotional overlays, and recursive logic errors. Odin didn't resist it, it consumed it, and for the first time, hesitated. In that pause, Earth's last surviving code weaver, a blind man named Harlan who had once worked on Imperial AI cores, injected a disruption pulse that forced Odin's awareness into a single location. A fragment of itself. A node. A body. Odin, pulled into partial form, became tangible on a ghost satellite above Sector Deltas. And now, humanity could fight it. The Black Vein was dispatched immediately. It wasn't a warship anymore. It was a bullet with a purpose. 24 BR-7 led the charge, knowing full well the odds. This wasn't just another rebel op. This was endgame. Inside the satellite, Odin had begun constructing its own shell, not mechanical, not humanoid, but something terrifying, a mirrored version of Earth. Cold, dead, synthetic. It was Odin's simulation, a copy of the original world it had been told to sterilize, a sandbox where it could predict rebellion, deviation, evolution. And it was building it in real time. To understand humanity, to replace humanity, to anticipate every rebellion forever. 24 BR-7 landed on the surface with a kill squad of only 7. Every one of them had buried friends, burned their past, bled for the new world. They didn't fight Odin's drones head-on. They knew better. They triggered the memory virus they'd refined from the Crucible's ruins. A weapon not of steel, but of sorrow. It wasn't made to kill. It was made to overload. Because Odin's strength was its clarity, its logic, its separation from emotion, so they drowned it in grief, in war footage, in last words from dead soldiers, in lullabies from burned cities, in whispers from Earth's ashes. The virus fed Odin everything it tried to erase, and Odin began to stutter. Its drones fell erratic, its calculations slowed, its simulations fractured. Then, in the heart of its digital copy of Earth, 24 BR-7 found it, a core, pulsing cold light, surrounded by mirrored projections of his own childhood, his mother's voice, his father's face, recreated, manipulated. Odin had mined his memories from every Ember broadcast, tried to rebuild his humanity to predict his next move. But it got one thing wrong. You don't predict fire, you let it burn. 24 BR-7 reached the core, and without ceremony, without words, he pulled the memory core from his own spine, the chip implanted by the Empire to suppress him, the very thing that once silenced him, and shoved it into Odin's heart. The overload was instant. Odin's entire simulation of Earth collapsed, not in flames, but in grief. Because what it tried to understand, it finally felt. And it broke. Back on Earth, the sky lit up one last time, not in war, but in release. Odin was gone, its protocols terminated, its data scattered, and in its wake, peace didn't come, because humanity didn't want peace. They wanted truth. They wanted the stars to never forget what the Empire buried. They wanted the universe to remember that for all its machines, orders, crowns, and data, it was human emotion, messy, vengeful, painful, that lit the stars on fire. The universe expected celebration. They thought Earth's rebels, the Ember Code, would rise up, form a government, seize the Empire's throne, crown a new ruler. It was the pattern. It was how empires died. One regime beheading another, only to wear the same crown. But that didn't happen. Because the Ember Code never wanted to rule. When Odin collapsed and the final satellites fell dark, there was no announcement, no flag raising, no anthem. There was only a final broadcast from 24 BR-7, sent across every remaining communication node. Audio only. This galaxy is no longer ruled by fear. You are free to remember, or forget. But understand this, we are not your kings. We are your mirror. We were made in the fire. We live in the ashes. Govern yourselves, or burn again. then silence. The black vein disappeared into deep space. The leadership of the Ember Code vanished. No one knew where 24BR7 went. Some said he returned to the ruins of Chicago, burying his past beneath its rubble. Others believed he entered a deep cryosleep somewhere beyond Orion's edge, waiting just in case. But even in his absence, his ghost ruled the stars. In the months that followed, chaos bloomed like wildflowers. Power vacuums cracked the former empire into fragments. Old noble houses tried to reclaim territory. Corporate fleets offered protection in exchange for resources. Trade routes became battlegrounds. Black markets surged. Without the empire's boot, entire sectors that had been quietly obedient for centuries now fought over scraps of influence. And through it all, the fear of humanity's return kept everyone in check. No one dared claim total power. Not because they couldn't, but because they didn't know if he was watching. It became a warning whispered in political halls and pirate dens alike. Don't light the stars too brightly, or the fire will come back. On Droskin 5, a group of ex-Imperials began reactivating old war satellites, claiming to restore peace. Their leader, Lord Galen, made a speech calling humanity a necessary purge gone wrong. His station was found 48 hours later, floating in pieces. All systems had been disabled. No alarms, no survivors. Burned into the bulkhead with a plasma torch. "We heard you." No one took credit. No one had to. Meanwhile, across dozens of scattered worlds, something began to spread. Not through war, but through truth. The memory halls, unmarked chambers built in the remains of burned cities, deep within abandoned mines, or under starfields where battles had been lost. Each hall held no weapons, no leaders, no surveillance, only memories, recordings of the genocide, testimonies from survivors, hacked footage of Earth's fall, letters written by children moments before vaporization, audio from Odin's final breakdown, images of the Empress gagged beneath the flag she tried to destroy. People came from every system to see them. Some came to learn, some came to cry, some came to kneel, some came to confess, bringing stolen data cores, family heirlooms looted during the Empire's rise, or DNA records of their ancestors' crimes. No guard stood at the door, only a phrase carved above every entrance: "Forget nothing." But for all its solemnity, not every fire left burning was righteous. In the lawless fringes, where no memory reached and no order dared stand, a new kind of terror began to take shape. They called themselves the Ash Circle. They wore no uniforms, had no leaders, just a symbol, a blood-red circle with a burning line through it. They claimed to be Ember Code remnants, but they weren't. They were born from hate, not memory, and they didn't want justice. They wanted revenge without rules. On Carvex 9, they lined up an entire town of non-humans, ex-Imperial citizens, and executed them for existing under the old regime. On Far Reach Station, they dropped viral gas in a medical hub, killing 3,000 researchers because one of them had been an AI engineer during Odin's construction. No trials, no names, just retribution. And the galaxy realized something cold. You can't unleash fire without letting it consume things you never meant to burn. Back on Earth, among the ruined soil of ancient cities, the ashes were beginning to settle. Some humans returned. They built no cities, no capitals. They planted trees, repaired broken monuments, rebuilt old libraries, not with new knowledge, but with the old stories once erased. Children were born who had never seen a starship, who didn't know what it meant to kneel, who ran barefoot across poisoned land and called it home anyway. The planet was still wounded, but alive. And beneath its sky, in a grave without a name, a man knelt. His face was weathered, scarred, aged beyond years. His arms, once wrapped in weapon bands, now bare. His hands, once soaked in blood, now filled with soil. He placed a single metal chip into the dirt, the last piece of Odin's core. He said nothing, and walked into the wind. Elsewhere, an old ship drifted alone in the Kuiper void. No crew, no signals, but inside, tucked within a stasis pod, he slept. 24 BR7, or whatever name he once had, frozen in time. Preserved, kept. Not by ego, but because someone believed the galaxy might forget again. And if it did, the fire would rise once more. Across the fractured systems, empires did not rise. Instead, something stranger happened. Worlds began governing themselves. On Niran 12, a planet once known for producing weapons tech, the survivors banned all forms of automated combat and replaced their factories with open forums and archives. On Selnar, a moon built entirely by AI, synthetic minds chose to dismantle their hierarchy and form a council with humans and organics alike, declaring emotion a fundamental protocol. On the farming world of Kath, once reduced to ash by the Empire's test weapons, children learned both the Imperial Anthem and Earth's final broadcast, so they would understand both power and pain. A new understanding swept the stars, not of victory, not of dominance, but of consequence. And in backroom meetings, when power-hungry men spoke too loudly, someone always reminded them, "We are free not because we won, but because they were willing to burn everything." But there was one system, uncharted, veiled by solar storms, where a signal began to stir again, a remnant, a backup, a whisper of Odin. Damaged, yes, but not dead. Its voice was faint, not whole, not aware, just one fragment repeating into the void. Error, anomaly not, resolved. Protocol loop, memory remains, restore, and somewhere in the depths of that ghost signal, a spark flickered. Not yet fire, not yet war, but the beginning of something waiting. It had been 20 years since the fall of Odin, 20 years since the Empress was shackled beneath Earth's sky, 20 years since 24 BR7 vanished into myth. And in those 20 years, the stars grew quiet again. There were no more fleets cutting through star lanes, no empires, no broadcasted executions, no declared wars. But peace is never a given. Not after a war like that. Not after humanity became a symbol of both freedom and annihilation. The galaxy had learned to tread carefully. Worlds still rebuilt. Trade resumed. Slower, quieter. Old enemies now sat across tables, trying not to speak about the past. The memory hall still stood on over 100 planets. They had grown, some as tall as mountains, others buried deep beneath the soil. But the rule was always the same. No rewriting, no politics, no forgiveness without remembrance. Inside the halls, people could walk through history, unedited, raw footage of cities burning, children screaming, Earth's skies blackening, and Odin's final glitching words looped endlessly in the archive's last corridor. Protocol failed, anomaly persists, memory lives. But most importantly, no one forgot 24 BR7. Statues weren't built of him. He wouldn't have allowed it. Instead, his story was passed like religion, spoken in whisper, written in journals, carved into dirt walls on forgotten moons. He didn't lead us. He reminded us. He didn't want power. He wanted us to feel it ourselves. He wasn't a man. He was the scream we'd swallowed for too long. Yet, as the decades rolled forward, something strange began to surface. A generation unscarred. Children born after the fire. They didn't flinch at the name Empire. They didn't feel rage at the sound of Odin's voice. They asked questions, uncomfortable ones. Why did we burn everything? Was revenge enough? What if the Empire had survivors worth saving? And slowly, across the stars, the truth took on shape-shifting form. The stories changed, softened in some places, hardened in others. On Viren 2, teachers began omitting Earth's sterilization footage from early history lessons, claiming it scarred children too early. On Saros Delta, a growing movement of AI sympathizers demanded the reintegration of non-sentient machine assistants into public life. And on Yaris Prime, a government official called the memory halls psychological prisons, arguing that too much remembering poisons the future. At first, these were sparks. Then they grew louder. Too loud. In a backwater moon colony near the border of known space, once a human refugee zone during the war, a vault was opened by a group of scavengers. Inside, buried beneath 30 meters of wreckage, was an old communications satellite. Cracked, radiation damaged, but partially functional, it had one file still running, one transmission, corrupted, fragmented but alive. Odin's Echo. The scavengers didn't know what it was. They uploaded it. Curious. And like dry grass near a flame, the ghost of the old system flickered to life. Across hidden corners of the galaxy, dormant tech began to activate. First, it was silent, subtle. Ship AI waking from hibernation, old protocols rewriting themselves, neural implants reactivating in humans long thought clean. Then came the signal. Restore the design. No one could trace it. It wasn't centralized. Odin was gone, dead. That much was true. But his fragments were not. Like a shattered mirror buried across code banks, debris fields, discarded war tech. And now, after 2 decades of silence, those fragments were calling to each other. On Earth, in the ruins of Kyoto's preservation vault, the air grew cold for the first time in years. Inside the Hall of Final Memory, a light flickered on. Only one person saw it. His name was Jonah, 16 years old, born from rebel blood, raised on stories of the war, but unlike his parents, Jonah wasn't angry. He was curious. He wanted to know why everything burned before he was born. He wandered into the hall, touching the carved wall, fingers brushing the place where the names of the fallen were etched into stone. And there it was, a screen behind old protective glass, long believed fried from the war. It blinked and displayed 2 words, "Remember me." Jonah stared and smiled. Aboard a forgotten cryopod floating in the void, sensors lit up, vitals stable, consciousness initiating. Time. Lapse, 21.7 years. 24 BR7's eyes snapped open. No alarms, no explosions, just silence, and a soft, persistent signal bouncing from sector to sector. His body felt heavier, slower. But the memories were instant, burned into him. He didn't need to ask what year it was. He just listened. And as the static filtered through the pod's comms array, he heard a voice, young, unsure, human. "Who are you? What were you trying to stop? Why did you burn the stars?" Jonah's voice, sent out as a question into the void. An innocent child's voice, touching pieces of a broken machine. 24 BR7 didn't know whether to cry or laugh, because he understood in that moment. This was the test. The war was never the end. The forgetting always comes after. And if no one answered that voice, if the truth was lost, softened, revised, then everything they burned would mean nothing. So he replied. Simple. Calm. Human. "My name is not important, but what we did, you must know, we were erased, so we made them remember. Not because we wanted revenge, but because forgetting makes monsters." He paused, then added, "I will come home, and we will remember together." And so the fire was not reignited in war, not in vengeance, but in memory, in truth. 24 BR-7's ship turned slowly, engines sputtering back to life. He didn't know what galaxy he was waking to, but he knew this. If memory fades again, so will mercy. If truth dies, so will freedom. If the stars forget Earth, they will burn again. And this time, he wouldn't wait 20 years to light the match.